Late one summer night in Moscow, a man is found dead in his own apartment. He has been stabbed, beaten with a hammer, and sprayed in the face with pepper spray. The killers? His 3 teenage daughters. But what happened that people started supporting the killer girls who brutally killed their father, and not the victim who was theirs father? When police arrive, the girls try to explain. They even cut themselves to make it look like self-defense. But detectives quickly realize their story doesn't add up. Within hours, the sisters are under arrest. At first glance, it looks like cold-blooded murder. 3 daughters plotting to kill their father, but as investigators dig deeper, a terrifying truth begins to surface. Was Mikhail Khachaturyan really just a father? Or was he something far worse? An abuser, a monster, a man who turned his home into a prison. This case will leave you shocked, because what starts as a brutal murder investigation soon becomes one of the most controversial stories in modern Russia, forcing the world to ask, when the law doesn't protect you, how far would you go to survive? Welcome to the show where we explore fractured minds. It was July 27, 2018. Mikhail Khachaturyan, 57 years old, had just returned from a psychiatric clinic. That evening, the tension in his Moscow apartment boiled over. His daughters, Kristina, 19, Angelina, 18, and Maria, 17 years old, attacked him as he sat in an armchair. They used knives, a hammer, and pepper spray. They stabbed him with knives multiple times, and they beat him until he died. Then they cut themselves, and all 3 of them were injured. The sisters staged injuries on themselves, called emergency services, and claimed self-defense. But investigators quickly saw inconsistencies. By the next day, the sisters were charged murder by a group of persons by prior agreement. Before continuing, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. From the very beginning, the story the sisters told stunned investigators. They didn't describe a strict father. They described a man who treated his home like a prison. He controlled everything they did. He beat them with belts and sticks. He locked them in their rooms for days. He cut them off from friends and outside life. He would punish them with pepper spray to the face, and he constantly reminded them that he was in charge, that no one could protect them. But the darkest part of their testimony was about what happened behind closed doors. The sisters accused him of forcing them to watch inappropriate videos, touching them against their will, and threatening far worse if they resisted. He forced them into things no father ever should. And this wasn't new. Their mother, Aurelia Dunduk, had lived through years of violence herself. She eventually fled the marriage. She tried to take her daughters, but she was terrified of Mikhail. When she fought for custody, his connections and intimidation made it impossible. So she left, hoping at least to survive. The 3 sisters stayed behind, trapped with him. Over the years, they tried to escape too. But he always dragged them back, threatening to kill them if they spoke to police. And in Russia at that time, there were no shelters, no restraining orders, and very little legal protection for victims of domestic abuse. The girls had nowhere to go. When this came out, psychologists examined them. They confirmed what the sisters had said. They were traumatized. Kristina and Angelina were diagnosed with PTSD and battered woman syndrome. Maria, the youngest, was in such deep stress that she was declared unfit for trial and placed in psychiatric care. So while prosecutors insisted this was a calculated killing, the defense argued it was something else entirely, a desperate act of survival. In September 2018, the sisters were released from jail, but placed under strict house arrest. They could not leave Moscow, speak to the media, or contact most people. By 2019, the case had exploded in the media. Over 300,000 people signed petitions demanding leniency. Protests, poetry readings, and marches erupted across Russia. Supporters saw the sisters as victims of a broken system. Opponents accused them of being spoiled, violent, and ungrateful. The BBC reported that the case touched a nerve, because domestic violence in Russia is widespread but poorly addressed. In 2017, the government had actually weakened protections, downgrading many abuse cases to minor offenses. For activists, the sisters' trial symbolized how the state abandons women trapped in abusive homes. In June 2019, investigators stuck with murder charges, though they admitted Mikhail had used unlawful violence. A month later, a separate case was opened against Mikhail himself, posthumously charging him with torture, sexual violence, and coercion. In early 2020, there was hope. Prosecutors briefly considered reclassifying the killing as necessary self-defense. But that decision was reversed, and the sisters still faced up to 20 years in prison. By mid-2020, Christina and Angelina were headed to jury trial. Maria's case was separated because of her age and psychological state. Then, in 2021, a breakthrough. The sisters were officially recognized as victims in their father's abuse case. Experts diagnosed Mikhail with pedophilia and violent manipulation. For the first time, the system acknowledged their suffering. By 2022, investigators added more charges against Mikhail, including battery and pornography distribution. In March 2023, his case formally went to court, even though he was already dead. The trial was symbolic but important. It forced Russia's legal system to admit his crimes. Meanwhile, the sisters' own trial dragged on. In October 2023, prosecutors rejected the indictment again, questioning whether revenge or trauma was the motive. Maria's case was extended indefinitely. On April 21, 2025, nearly 7 years after the killing, Moscow's Butyrsky District Court delivered a historic ruling. Mikhail Khachaturyan was found guilty of sexual abuse, torture, grievous bodily harm, and distributing pornography. His daughters and even a family friend were officially declared victims. Because he was dead, the case closed immediately. But the conviction gave legitimacy to everything the sisters had claimed. Yet here's the twist. Despite their father's conviction, the sisters themselves are still facing murder charges. As of September 2025, no resolution had been reached. The Khachaturyan sisters' story isn't just about one family. It's about a country where victims of domestic violence have almost nowhere to turn. There are no restraining orders in Russia. Shelters are rare. Police often ignore calls for help or side with the abuser. That's why so many people saw themselves in these girls. A 2019 poll found that nearly half of Russian women believed the sisters had no other choice. Activists argue this wasn't murder, it was survival. The case has inspired protests like the Sister March and campaigns like I Didn't Want to Die. But it's also highlighted how difficult activism has become. Since the war in Ukraine, many women's groups have been branded as foreign agents. Speaking out can be dangerous. 3 young women, now in their mid-20s, have spent the past 7 years under the shadow of a murder charge. Their father has finally been declared guilty of monstrous abuse, but their own trial still looms. And so the question remains, when the law fails, when the system offers no escape, what choices are left for victims? For many, the Khachaturyan sisters are not just defendants, they are survivors. Their story is a chilling reminder of how easily justice can fail and how far someone might go when survival is the only option left.